All right, let us bring on Christina Hoff Sommers. She is one of our favorite guests, and I'm sorry, it's been a long time since we had her on. She's a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, wrote a terrific book called Who Stole Feminism, and another terrific book called The War Against Boys. She hosts a video blog on YouTube called The Factual Feminist, and you can find her at CH Sommers, SOMMERS, on Twitter. Christina, it's good to see you again. Can you hear me?
Yes, how are you?
All right. I'm sorry. It's been so long since I've seen you. We've had so much has happened here. I've neglected to bring you on, but I always think that you're somebody I want to be asking questions of, because your factual feminism is really a welcome perspective. Let's put it that way. So I want to talk to you first. I want to get to Harvey Weinstein, some of the sex scandals that I've been sort of dealing with a little bit in Hollywood, but I want to start by asking you, you wrote this wonderful book called The War Against Boys, and I talk a lot about the war against manhood. Is that still going on, and are they winning? Is the war, are men losing the war against men?
I think so, and very little has changed for young men in school. They're still falling behind, and yet there seem to be no efforts to strengthen them. We had programs to strengthen girls when they were behind in math and science. There has been nothing for little boys in everything else: reading, writing, school engagement, college matriculation. But worse than that, there is now a kind of vigilante feminism loose on campus, where men are guilty because accused, and I see no change there. If anything, it's intensifying. So on the campus, you have more and more women and fewer men. And the women still think of themselves as victims put upon. I say the women. I don't mean the women. This is not the majority. It's a small but very vocal group, from the Women's Center, the intersectional feminists. And they have a very negative view of masculinity.
Do you see, aside from the obvious, the obvious points of men getting fewer places in college, being tormented by these kangaroo courts over sexual harassment, what about in personal lives? Do you study this at all? Like, what is the effect of this kind of feminism on the average person's personal life?
I think so many young men must be confused. A friend of mine has a son that just started Princeton this year as a freshman, and she thinks he's afraid of girls. That he's very active, very lively, very wonderful young man, but just so worried that if he says anything or is misinterpreted, maybe he'll outgrow that. He's a freshman, but I would be, if I had a son in college right now, I would be very worried. Now, again, the majority of girls aren't hysterics; they're not neurotic, but maybe as many as 10 or 20%. They take one too many of these gender studies courses, which tend to be male phobic and encourage this kind of what I call fainting couch feminism. I grew up and still believe in feminism that asserts equality with men. Fainting couch feminism wants protection from them and treats women as if they're fragile little birds who can't cope. Now, stipulate, life is full of danger, and there are pathological criminals, and I would consider Harvey Weinstein to be one. But this is not the male norm. But what you will see, and this is happening in social media right now, it's happening on campus, they will take the worst case sort of male predator and hold him up as if he's an exemplar of the entire gender.
Well, that's kind of what is happening out here right now. I mean, it is, it's funny. I was talking to someone I work with in the film business yesterday, and he was telling me that they're having daily meetings now as predators are caught, and people who have harassed women for years are caught and fired. For instance, if an agent gets fired, then all his clients are now free. So they're trying to find out who's going to go next so they can scoop up all his clients. I mean, that's
well, it begins to sound a lot like McCarthyism. It's a kind of sexual McCarthyism.
Yeah.
Now, there were communists in the State Department. There were communists who were on the payroll of, the Communist Party in Moscow. But there were a majority of people who were accused were not dangerous people, yet they were harmed by the scare. And I think we're seeing it again. I think we will look back. I think a lot of innocent people are going to be ruined, all because of this twisted politics, gender politics, and this kind of moral panic.
When feminists come out and they do this, and they do it certainly online a lot, and they blame, for instance, Harvey Weinstein on this new phrase, they always come up with, they're so good at coming up with these condemnatory phrases. They have this phrase, toxic masculinity. What do you think is the result of that to people like me? I'm so old-fashioned. I actually ascribe to the laws of being a gentleman. I mean, you and I are you and I have a Venn diagram where we sort of meet. But I am an old-fashioned gentleman, and one of the things I miss is why was there no boyfriend or husband here who just punched Harvey Weinstein's lights out? I mean, I don't understand where that I could use a little bit more of that toxic masculinity to shut a guy like this down. But
yes, in fact, that's what you will find, that men are as much or more horrified by Harvey Weinstein. I mean, They can't stand him and want to, yet somehow that did not apply in Hollywood. And, you know, all the moralizers in Hollywood telling the rest of us how to live, and yet this was able to persist for years. And again, this is not low-level teasing or flirting or, this was criminal predatory behavior.
Yes.
I mean, if these cases are true. And when you get in a case like Cosby or Weinstein, you have so many women coming forward. It's very, I do believe in due process and innocent until proven guilty, but that's true in a court of law. But in public opinion, we don't have to obey that in cases where there's such, tangible evidence from so many people. So there is such a thing as toxic masculinity or pathological masculinity, but it is not that there's also healthy masculinity. And a healthy masculinity is characterized by not exploiting and tormenting women, but having feelings of respect and protectiveness, and not tearing things apart, but building. Toxic masculinity is something very different, and it's a mistake to attribute that to most men.
So this is one of the things I actually wanted to ask you is what is it? It seems right now that people have societal guidelines on what to teach girls. They should be strong. They should be fearless. They should be this, but no guidelines on what to teach boys. Now, you're a mom, right? I mean, what do you think mothers should teach their boys about being men?
Well, first of all, it's a mistake to think that you can turn them into girls. And what I see in the schools and what I see coming from gender theory is, if we just gave boys dolls and nurturing toys and we didn't allow them to play cops and robbers, that encourages this toxicity. Wrong. There is a way to raise a boy which is respectful of his young masculine nature, which is to teach him to be a gentleman, to teach him to be a good sport, you have to open up a boy's heart. But you can't do that. It's not quite the same with a girl. With a girl, both children, male and female, need character education, moral education, good examples. But it's with a boy, you have to respect his young manhood. And I do think through sportsmanship and the relationship with coaches, and fathers are very important. We're not hearing much about that, as well as this idea of a gentleman. And when I wrote The War Against Boys, I interviewed boys and asked from all sorts of different subcultures across, surfers in Los Angeles and urban kids in D.C., and they all liked the idea of being a gentleman. They didn't quite know how to do it, but it means something positive to them. I think that we could work with that. And both my boys are gentlemen.
Yeah. Not
that they're, perfect, but they are kind and considerate and respectful of women. And
here is a philosophical question that I want to ask you, because it's kind of bothering me. Recently, I read a novel called Submission, which is, I think, the masterpiece of a very fine French novelist whose name I can't pronounce, but it's something like Michel Houellebecq. And it.
Yeah, I'm afraid of that book. Is it good?
I thought it was terrific. I thought it was terrific and memorable and deeply disturbing. Yeah, and it's about the Islamic takeover of France. And one of the points he makes in the book is that Islam offers patriarchy, and patriarchy works. And it made me think back on the famous book from the 80s called The Closing of the American Mind, in which the author says,
Alan Bloom.
Alan Bloom says that patriarchy, essentially, he doesn't use that term, but he says the patriarchy is not fair, but it worked, and we may wish there was something to replace it, but there may not be. He doesn't say there isn't, but he says there may not be. And that kind of is what submission puts forward, that when Islam comes in, the guys are kind of going, yeah, this works. This will work. And what we had before didn't work and was empty and it had no moral value. Do you think that there is something, if the patriarchy must go, is there something to replace it? Is there an idea that can replace it and still have normal, fruitful relationships between men and women?
Yes, I think that sort of, an enlightened democracy that we have, more or less. It's not perfect, but if you look around, most workplaces, men and women get along.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't believe don't buy into the moral panic that it's all just predatory behavior and this hidden state of siege. Women are living in it. It's not true. And I think that we have to be realistic. We may, Hollywood obviously needs to do something, and they need an HR department for the whole industry. Yeah. But overall, rather quickly, men and women were, found one another in the workplace, and now most workplaces are, co-ed. And in colleges and so forth, and it works. Mm-hmm. And I think too, do people? I listen to some of the feminists who I think are quite hysterical. I mean, do they want us to start wearing burqas or to have separate lives from men because they're so dangerous? And well, no, they say we just have to, put them in workshops or again change little boys from their nature. That's not going to happen. But we do have a time-honored method that works, which is, as I said, sort of raising considerate children and raise young men to be gentlemen. And of course, it helps if young women are, dare I say it, ladies.
Yeah.
And you know what? Where I visit colleges all the time, there are crazy kids protesting, but the kids that invite me, that I go out to dinner with, I still see well-behaved young people getting along and working together.
I see that a lot too, and I do hear women saying, "Yes, I have been harassed by jerks, but so many men have also mentored me and brought me forward and have treated me with respect."
That's the point. Yeah. That's the main point. We've all known troglodytes. We can name them, but right. In my lectures, I tell when women start complaining about, "Oh, this man did that," I said, "Okay, I know there are bad characters out there. But how many men did the opposite? How many men supported you? How many men were, encouraging to you and helpful to you and friends to you?" And the vast majority of women, it would be most of the men they know. Yeah. So we've got to keep, common sense at the center of this discussion. But social media doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. It's kind of like the matrix of stupidity. It's true. Christina Hoff Sommers, thank you very much for coming on. The Factual Feminist. Find her at CHSOMMERS on Twitter. Is there anywhere else people should look for you?
The Factual Feminist on YouTube.
On YouTube. That's a YouTube channel. Okay.
Yeah, and CH Sommers.
All right. Well, I hope it won't be so long before I see you again. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Lovely talking to you. Bye-bye.
Bye.